All right. Welcome to episode 5 of the Vance Hines podcast, Extra Usual. We've got Seherzada Kantarevic Burris today. She is a young lady that I work with at the DA's office. She's right now doing the Justice of the Peace prosecutions. She's prosecuting the Class C's and also prosecuting the other, starting to do the other misdemeanors in the county court. But, after talking to her and hearing her story, I knew I had to get her on her podcast. She is was born and lived during the Bosnian War, where Yugoslavia was breaking up. Her family was Muslim during the war, and her parents fought on the Bosnian side, the Muslim side, and they've lost their side lost the fight, and so her family fled into a refugee camp, a Bosnian refugee camp, where she lived for about 3 years, 2.5, 3 years with her family in tents, and that's where she got a passion to become a lawyer, because it was lawyers that were coming in and trying to help them to be better and help them to have a better life. And then she immigrated to America, immigrated to the United States. They settled around Garland, Texas. They put her through the schools here in Texas, and they were a Muslim family during the 9/11 attacks. So she lived through the anti-Muslim sentiments of the, after the 9/11 attacks and since, basically. And then when she went to college and turned 18, become an adult, she made the choice to convert to Christianity. And her Bosnian family abandoned her, and so she was out on her own. She put herself through college, put herself through law school, and she's still pursuing her passion to become a prosecutor that prosecutes child abuse. And so she's a very serious and I think extra usual young lady, and I really happy to get a chance to interview her. So you don't want to miss this podcast. You don't want to miss everything that she's been through, and so I'm pleased to have a chance to have her on. But I want to throw out a couple of people I'm still calling my sponsors. So far, nobody's hired me, but as always, Chef Eugenio Torres of Fresh and Rico. He's every 2 pounds I lose, he gives me a free meal. So I'm punishing him. If you're in or around the Waxahachie area, the Ellis County area, please try Fresh and Rico. Order his meals at freshandrico.com. That's fresh, the letter N, rico.com. You will not be unhappy. I mean, it's great meals, healthy meals. If you're trying to lose weight, his meal prep's the way to go. Also, I want to give a shout out as always, to Diamond Dallas Page and his DDPY program. That's changed my life. Go to DDP Yoga now and try out the app. He'll give you 7 days free. It's an awesome program. I wouldn't be here today without the DDPY program. I also want to give a shout out to the Life Quest cards. My wife and I have been doing those. Those are a lot of fun. You get a different quest every day. So go to, I think it's lifequestcards.com, but I may not be right about that. But go check out the Life Quest cards. That's a lot of fun. And check out Bert's Chrysler's new special, Secret Time, on Netflix. He's been a big supporter of mine, and he's been my inspiration from the beginning. So I always got to give a shout out to Bert. I know he never listens, but I'll still give him a shout out. So check out Sherry. It's a great story. It really makes you re-examine your life and the troubles you've been through, and makes you think, how lucky you are to grow up where you did and not have to live through the things that Sherry's did. But she's kept a great attitude, a great passion, and I hope I hope you'll listen to her podcast and check it out. You really need to watch this lady. She's a superstar in the making. So without anything further, here is Seherzada Kantarevic Burris. All right, this will be our 5th podcast that we've got recorded. This is the 5th one, and today we have the exceptional opportunity to interview Seherzada Kantarevic. Burris.
One more.
And she goes by Sherry Burris. And Sherry, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to be here.
All right. And my wife's here, Mary, to always give us the female perspective on everything.
We get 2 today.
I know.
Yeah,
you're outnumbered.
That's right. And Kevin's, my smart-ass cousin's missing today. He elected for football today. So I see where I stand on the hierarchy of priorities in his life.
Right.
So, all right. But I can understand that. All right. Now, Sherry, I asked you if I could interview you on my podcast because you've got a great, interesting story, childhood story, and then even into your teens and growing up, and then and into your profession. I mean, you've told me that story, and we worked together at the DA's office. But you've told me your story 2 or 3 different times.
I have. You've asked a lot of questions.
Well, I'm interested in it.
Well, I'm glad.
All right. Well, let's start with your name, where you live, and what you do now.
So my full name is actually Seherzada Kantarevic Burris. I work as a prosecutor in the Ellis County DA's office. And I live in Rowlett, but I'm moving to Waxahachie in about 2 months, 69 days when I get married. I'm excited.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Way better commute.
Yeah.
It is much better. It'll be 7 minutes compared to, an hour and 10 minutes.
And so, and I was told that you were leaving my house regardless of what happens at 3:30 today.
Yes. Nick and I have a wedding shower to go to, so I have to get back, put on my dress, and then get going. So if I just jump and leave mid-conversation.
We'll get done.
All right.
Yeah.
So anytime you want to leave, stop, whatever you want. The wedding shower is much more important.
All right. Well, there are people there waiting, and know.
And they're giving you things.
Yeah. They're giving me free things.
They're giving you free things.
It's nice.
They're getting you ready for the future.
I just have to show up.
And so, is Nick from around here?
He's been here for a few years. He spent most of his life in Cedar Hill. That's where his mom lives now. So he went to some of the schools there. But he's been in Waxahachie working for this company for a few years. He traveled a lot in the beginning. I think he's been there for about 10 years and started in doing sales and IT and traveled a lot. So now he's back in Waxahachie for good, I think.
How'd you meet him?
We met in law school. We knew each other the first 2 years, but we didn't really talk or communicate, and I was dating someone else. And then our 3rd year, we met in our commercial law class, which was horrible for me because I'm not a business mind-oriented person, so I just wanted to get through the class. I loved it, but it did not work. And Nick is very IT and numbers and business perspective, so he kind of helped me get through the class.
All right. When did you graduate law school?
I graduated in December of 2017, I think. We're in 2008. Yeah. So.
And when did you pass the bar?
I took the bar in February, and then I found out May 2nd or 3rd. I was really excited. I did not have to go through that again because that was the worst.
Yeah,
probably the worst.
When he did it, it was terrible.
Yes, it was. I watched Nick do it because he graduated in December, and so I watched him study and take it, and he doesn't get as stressed out as I do as quickly, and so he got stressed, and I thought, man, I'm just gonna die during this thing because it's just a lot of pressure for 3 days of testing, and I'm not a good test taker, so.
Well, I felt like my whole life depended on this one test.
It does.
Everything I've done up to that point, everything. If I didn't pass that test, then it was all going to be wasted, you know?
Yeah, that's well, and I've wanted to be an attorney since I was, 6 or 7 years old. So my whole life, all the classes I took in high school and in college, and everything was geared towards I'm going to be an attorney, and I want to do, I want to prosecute child abuse cases, and so I took all the child development classes and everything. And so for me, it felt like walking into the test. I've worked for 27 years for this, and now I have to execute, no pressure at all.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, you can take it again, but it's just, I did not want to have to go through that again.
But congratulations.
Thank
you.
you.
So now you're what we would call a baby lawyer.
Yes, I
am.
am.
Baby prosecutor.
Yes, as anything prosecutor, I'm just excited.
Yeah. So how did you know you wanted to be an attorney at 6 years old? How did you even know what an attorney was?
Well, so I grew up in Bosnia. I spent the first three and a half years of my life there, and then the Bosnian Civil War started, and it was Yugoslavia at the time, so it was just a bunch of different people fighting over this land, and specifically, and I remember in middle school and in high school they called it ethnic cleansing, and it really was the Catholic Christian people that were in Yugoslavia that wanted to push out the Muslims. And so my family was Muslim. And so after we left and fled Bosnia, we were in these last refugee camps. And, I remember seeing lawyers and attorneys, but I didn't know who they were, but it felt like they had this power because when they came or they said something, things would change for the better. And so I remember asking my mom, who are these people? Why do they have this power? And she said, those are lawyers. And I said, I want to be one of those people when I grow up. And that was during a really, really rough time because we were living in a tent in a refugee camp. But I knew that they made things better, and I wanted to make things better for other people. And I wanted to go into those hard places and, be the lawyer that some 6 or 7 year old kid can see and say, I want to do that.
So when you say refugee camps, where and describe what you're talking about?
So there was just, things that I remembered and I verified with my mom and kind of asked her since I was so young. I remember one of the camps, we had these big green tents. And I love the sound of rain when I'm sleeping because I remember as a child hearing it on the tent, and I loved the way that it sounded. It was very soothing. So anytime it rains now, I'll open the window a little bit because it reminds me of that time. Even though I was terrified then, it's just it's a soothing sound. And so one of the last camps that we were at, they had what I remember looking like portables, and my mom has pictures, and they just look like school portables that we have now. And so they would put 2 or 3 families in there and kind of separate the room, and that's that was where we found refuge and where we found food. And they had a big cafeteria area. They would serve food daily, and so everybody would go, and you had your little stamp, and you'd get stamped. I mean, it was like the tent cities that we've probably seen in the recent past here.
And so, why did y'all have to flee Bosnia?
Well, we were Muslim, and we were, I think, outnumbered probably. My dad did serve in that war, and he did get shot kind of in the hip area and in the arm. But it was just people that had different ideas that wanted Yugoslavia to be in a different place, and the Bosnians had been there just as long, and so the Bosnian Muslims at least felt like this is our home, and we've been here for years, and my grandparents had been there their whole lives. And so when the troops kind of infiltrated the villages, we didn't really have a choice. You had to get out because we tried fighting and it didn't work. We were outnumbered, and so fleeing was the other option. Fight or flight.
And how many years of your life were you in these refugee camps?
So I left, when we left, I was about 3.5, almost 4. And then we came to America and I was almost 7. So we were there for about 2.5 years, 2.5, 3 years.
And the, let's see, 3.5 and to 7, three, three.
Yeah,
three
we came here in November of 96 and I was born in March of 90. So I was just about to turn 7.
I got you.
Mm-hmm.
And the, do you have many memories of that time?
I have a few. I think a few that were probably traumatic that any kid, even now, kids that have had traumatic experiences, they remember that time. And I remember learning in child development that, between the age of 3 and 6 is really where a lot of memory, a lot of things that you remember from that age. And so there's a few times I remember getting in trouble once. My dad told me to, go get our food that morning. And I remember walking and he said, go straight there. And of course I stopped and there was a tree and I looked at the tree and then there was some kids playing and, I went and talked to the kids. And what I didn't know is that he had followed me to make sure that I was okay and safe. And, but when I came back, he said, okay, where'd you go? And I said, I went straight there and I came back. And so so I learned really quickly. So, I remember things like that, or just, feeling really terrified and really scared. And, while I was sleeping in the rain thinking, there's so many noises going on and there's gunshots and bombs that you can hear and just being really scared of dying. And then my mom had my middle sister while we were in Croatia. And so, I remember thinking this poor little baby needs doctors and shots and things. And, where are we going to get that from? But, she was there and she was so young. And that was right when we were about to leave and come to America. So she doesn't remember a lot of it. But, I was 6 years old. So
Did you witness any of the fighting or any of the skirmishes or anything of that war?
No, I don't think my parents stayed ahead of a lot of the fighting. While we were in Bosnia, my dad did go and serve, and then he was able to come home very often. It wasn't like the war was far, and so he would go and fight and come home. And I would remember seeing him and talking to him and, watching him walk down the hill because they just walked. They walked back home. I don't know where they got dropped off. So I got to see a lot of the terror that he went through, but I didn't firsthand see any of it. I think my parents kept me pretty sheltered and away from that, thankfully. I'm grateful.
Now, you told me before that you've got a hearing problem.
I do.
And what was that caused from?
So my right ear, when I was born, I think there was issues with it. I had to stay in the hospital for the first few days. And then, growing up with bombs and gunshots going around is not good for your eardrums. And so my right ear, I had a perforated eardrum. So I had a hole probably the size of a quarter that was in my ear. And so the sound just wasn't getting through. And then I lost the hearing in my left ear while I was on a boat with one of my mentors. I backflipped off. I landed it and it was beautiful. But then I had swimmer's ear. And so the doctor told me when I jumped in that the water just kind of went rushing in one ear. But he said to reach equilibrium, that ear busted too. And so then I was really hard of hearing for a little while.
And the before we started, you showed me what town y'all were from in Bosnia.
Such a cute little puppy. Yes, Velika Kladuša.
All right, so
it's in the west.
Is this that's?
Nope. Yeah, you're in like Serbia. You might want to zoom out a little bit. It's hard to.
I can't read it.
You're still in the wrong place.
I am?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there it is. Over here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where you went.
I guess I was
there okay.
It is.
There you go, up there.
All right. So Serbia's was on the east side.
Mm-hmm. So Croatia's just right up up there. So when we've gone to visit, we fly into Zagreb, which is up north, and then Velika Kladuša is kind of the most western part of Bosnia. So that's where my family is from. And it's really, I think it takes us probably 45 minutes to get to the border to get to Croatia, because it's just right there at the tip.
So could you just go across to Croatia if you could remember?
Oh, I think as a child, that's probably the route that we took when we left. But see, I was born in Bihać, which is 3 hours from where Velika Kladuša is, but it's south. So it's just...
I hear.
Yeah.
So you were the farthest from the Serbian then?
Yes, we were. Well, at the time, it wasn't Serbia and Bosnia. It was Yugoslavia. Yeah. So all of that was just one big country. Yeah. So Croatia and Bosnia and Serbia and Montenegro, they were all one. And now they're, all split and separated. So at the time, it wasn't
anything like
there wasn't all the borders and everything.
Yeah. Okay. But most of the people you were fighting was over here coming from the east.
Yeah, I think it was a culmination of people. I know that my dad said there was a lot of Croatians, a lot of Serbians, and again, at the time, I don't know if they called themselves Croatians and Serbians, since we didn't really have the lane division that we do now. But I know it was a lot of Christian and Catholic, versus Muslim. Oh, there you go. Zoom in.
Have you been back there to visit since you've grown up?
I have. I've been back 3 or 4 times. The last time I went was in 2008. My parents sent me when I graduated high school. So I went with my best friend, who's my cousin, and then her older sister also.
You still have family there?
I do. I have a lot of family there. I have my last living grandparent, my grandma, my mom's family is there, and all of my dad's family is there. So my mom does have 2 brothers and a sister here, and then both sets of my parents have several siblings. Way too many children for one woman to have.
What did you think when you went back? Did you recognize anything?
I didn't. When we went back the first time, I remembered. No, I lied. The very first time, I did remember the house that we lived in. And my parents had pictures that I'd seen. And so before we went, it kind of jogged my memory. And I remember our house was just these big, cedar blocks. It wasn't, how all the houses are here. And all of the men built their own houses. And so I remember we didn't have a roof. We just had, it was just all of the blocks, and then there was window and there was a door, but it was just flat. There wasn't a roof on top. It was just cement. Yeah, it had just been poured cement. And so I knew that my dad was going to add on, but, at the time he just didn't, and they couldn't afford it. And so he just, we had this little 1 bedroom and a little kitchenette area. But when we went back, my uncle that had lived there, he was paralyzed. And so my dad let him stay in that house because he couldn't work with his family. And so they had put a little roof on it, but my dad has built a lot more on it. So now it's just gigantic.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
Oh, do I have? Good, because I was going to say my parents have too many. So I have two sisters from my parents, and then I have an adopted sister, Andrea, who's, now my family. So I have 3 total, but our family dynamic is just all over the place.
So the 2 sisters, where do you fit into the age group?
I'm the oldest of all of them. So I'm 28, and then Andrea is 27. Anella is 21 or 22. She's turned 22, and then Ines is 12.
So there's a boy, 2 sisters and a boy?
No, it's all girls.
All girls? 4 girls?
Yes, it's all girls. So my birth parents had the 3 of us.
Okay.
Anella, Ines, and me, Seherzada. And then my adopted mom had Andrea. She adopted her, and then she adopted me later.
All right. And what did your dad do in Yugoslavia?
I think he did a lot of car repair work. because he knew a lot about cars. And when we came to America, he worked at the Jiffy Lube because he knew about cars, but he didn't know the language. And so he didn't really need to, somebody would come in and tell him what their car was doing, what noises it was making. And he could, pretty much figure it out by starting it or looking at it. And so he did car mechanics there. And then, he fought in the war, and they had a mandatory draft. And so you had to go, and then once you reached the age of 30, if you got there, you didn't. So I have an uncle who didn't. He didn't.
Wow.
He didn't.
Fight?
Yeah, he didn't serve. He reached the age of 30, and he was happy. But he was, he was working abroad, and so he didn't get picked up to go.
Do you have any knowledge about the process of immigrating to America out of the refugee camp? I don't know if that's something parents might have talked about. Or?
No, I have a little bit. I remember, talking to my mom about it. And so, she told me at the last camp we were at, so you had to have somebody that was here in the States that vouched for you. And, I guess, my parents filled out an application and that person did. And then you just waited. And, I think the U.S. got involved in helping refugees in Bosnia pretty late in the game. And so when they did, they kind of opened the doors and allowed people to come in, but you had to have somebody that was here. And then we had different charities and different people that helped us pay for an apartment. And, they kind of, people donated to their churches or they donated to groups. And then those groups bought us furniture. And, but all I can say is we did have an application process, and then they kind of had all the applications in a pile, and a person just got picked when they had enough money to send a whole family over, because flights are expensive even back then.
Did you pick the country, or were there other countries? And do you have some family that went to other countries? Or
no, I have a great aunt that's in Macedonia, but I think she had always been there, and so we didn't really, we didn't get a choice. I mean, we could have walked or gone over to one of the other European countries, but America was the land of opportunity, and it was the land of the free, and so my parents wanted to go to the best. If they had a choice, they didn't want to go somewhere that was trying to get to America status. They just wanted to go to the top notch.
Now, I want to talk to you about religion some. If I ask you anything that makes you uncomfortable, just stop and we won't talk about it.
Oh, I'll tell you.
All right.
You know that from work.
Yeah, I have no doubt.
I have no doubt.
Yeah. All right, but there's a fly in here. But so you grew up Muslim, and how long were you considered a Muslim?
For 21 years. I didn't start, not really questioning, but not questioning my religion, but questioning my spiritual life. And I think they're different, until I was, about to turn 21. So that 2 weeks before, I just kind of, my parents we weren't devout Muslims. And so we didn't, go to mosque, and we didn't pray 5 times a day. And a lot of the, stuff that people know and have learned about Islam, I don't, because we just didn't, we had a Quran in our house that was always wrapped really nicely in this silk cloth. And, but, my dad read out of it to us a handful of times that I can remember. And so I didn't really know anything about my religion. But it just didn't, the things that I didn't know didn't really fit with me, and I didn't feel like that was the way that I wanted to lead my life. And so for the first 21 years of my life, I was Muslim.
And did y'all, when you went to mosque, went to a particular mosque around? You said you're from Rowlett. How long have you lived in Rowlett?
So my parents live in Garland. Initially, when we came to the U.S., we were in Dallas, and we were at these apartments off of Pineland and Pine Branch. I think they're called Vickery Meadows, or it's the Vickery Meadows area. So we were in Dallas for a while, and then when I was in 6th grade, we moved to Garland. So my parents were in Garland. They've lived in Garland ever since. My adopted mom now lives in Rowlett, and so I'm living there with her. But yeah, my parents have lived in Garland since I was in 6th grade.
And they're still
So
there
it's-
in Garland now?
They are. The same house.
And is there a particular mosque up there that they went to, or when they did go?
No, I've gone to probably 3 that I can remember. One was for a friend of mine. Her dad passed away, and we went. I think that one was in Plano. And then my dad took us to one that I think was in Richardson. But we didn't ever go unless it was a special occasion. And the first time it was just to see what it was. And then, the next time I went by myself. My dad didn't come, but it was for my friend's father's funeral services. So I couldn't tell you the name of it because I, gone 2 or 3 times. It just wasn't a big deal. It wasn't, for my parents, we didn't have to go to the mosque, but we also didn't talk a lot about religion. And so that's why I didn't really know anything about where I came from or what I believed or what I was supposed to believe.
Well, I know very little about Islam.
Me too.
And, yeah. And so is there anything that you could, you come from a very unique perspective of someone that grew up in a Muslim home, although maybe not, as devout as most or others, and then converted by choice to Christianity. Is there anything you could tell me that would educate me, or something I may not know about Islam?
I don't know if I could educate you much. I know a lot of things that I've heard people in the news or the way that the religion is kind of seen in our nation today, I think is completely wrong. It's really not a religion that's full of hatred and all of these rules. It really is a religion of love, and I think people don't understand that. And even the few times that my parents try to sit down with us and read the Quran or talk to us, it wasn't as harsh as people see it now. So there's not a lot, like I remember my dad talking to me about when a man dies and he goes to heaven and he gets 72 virgins, and I just thought that's absurd. Yeah. What does a man need with 72 virgins? What are we doing? What are you gonna do?
I think I told you that I always wondered, if I died and got 72 virgins, what those virgins did to deserve me. That's a joke I'd heard somewhere.
A lot of things like that. I think people know random facts or random things that they've been told or opinions that they have, but. There's not a lot that I can probably teach you on, and I don't want to say anything wrong because I know I'm misguided. I didn't get a lot of the education in that, but I know that it's not a religion of hate either. So that I can say.
I listened to a book one time, and it was talking about the 3 religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, that they all come from Abraham.
Mm-hmm. They do.
And they all worship the same God up until Abraham. And then, depending on which brother or son broke off from Abraham, of how the religion went. So really, it's the same God, but it's the interpretation and how it's evolved over time.
Right.
So I always thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I think it is. It just like in our line of work, we could read one section of the code and have completely different interpretations, and it's one of those things that's always been appalling to me. How could we stem from one thing and then have completely different views? Yeah. But then, we see it in court all the time, so it's easy to understand now as I'm older.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Tell me about your life growing up here as a Muslim.
It wasn't the only times really that I can remember feeling like religion was a factor for me was when 9/11 happened. But before then, I don't think my friends knew that I was Muslim, and I didn't wear a hijab. I didn't look like I was a practicing Muslim, and so I was just this tiny little white girl, really. And I don't mean that in an insulting way, but you couldn't tell that I was from anywhere else for a long time because I learned English. I took ESL classes, and I learned enough to, where I sounded like I was from here. And it didn't really, being a Muslim didn't really come into play in my life until 9/11 happened. And my dad was working at MCI, which was bought out by Verizon. But it was MCI WorldCom. And I remember him coming home from work, the week after that. And people had found out he was Muslim and just kind of bashed him and threw a lot of insults and threats and just a lot of nasty things that people do when something, is horrific and tragic as 9/11 happens. And so I remember then being scared that people would find out I was Muslim.
And how old were you when 9/11 happened?
I was 11.
And did you suffer any type of issues from after 9/11 because of your religion?
Yeah, I mean, I had a few people that knew I was Muslim. That I remember in our history class, our teacher, when we were talking about issues and different wars and stuff, and in social studies, and I remember telling people I was from Bosnia, and so people knew I was Muslim, but it wasn't as big of an issue, like I said, until 9/11. And then I had a few friends that, told me to go back to where I came from. And
These are good friends?
No.
Apparently not.
Yeah. And I mean, people, even this past election, you see what comes out, people when they're angry. And so I didn't take a lot of it to heart, but it was hurtful because, I had nothing to do with that. And my family had nothing to do with that. And even my country had nothing to do with that. It was, one group of men or women, people that decided to make that happen. And so I didn't feel like it was fair to judge a whole group. I hate group admonishments because if I didn't do anything, I shouldn't, be treated the same. So there was a few people that, made comments like that or, didn't want to sit with me at lunch anymore. And I just thought, that's fine. I like eating lunch in silence, so I can think.
Were there any other Muslims in school with you?
There was, and especially in Dallas, it was a heavily refugee populated area, and so a lot of people from different countries. And so there was people in my school that you could tell they were Muslim. They wore the head covering, or and I don't know how they fared. I mean, I had a few friends, a few people that I was friends with like that, but I think it was probably a lot worse for them than for me because, everyone didn't know I didn't look like I was Muslim. And so people didn't know. And so I didn't get as much hatred, but I can't imagine what those kids did. And at 11 and 12 years old, I mean,
That's
you're
traumatic.
still, and you're still forming and you're still trying to figure out who you are. And so it's hard to feel like I can't be myself because if people find out, they may say something. And so I know during that time in my life, I was very insecure and I didn't want people to know because I didn't want to deal with the bullying. And I had a boy haircut and I didn't do hair and makeup. And so, I had bad acne. And so I already had so many things stacked up against me. And then, this also was just something that I could hide. And I think for a while I tried because I just didn't, and my dad sat down with me and said, this is where you come from. This is your religion and you should be proud of it because you didn't get on that plane and you didn't do anything. So, you can't associate with those people. So I had to learn that, unfortunately, the hard way, but kids get bullied for several reasons. So,
well, did the fear eventually go away?
It did. And I think the more educated that people got here in the States and around the world, I think it got better and I didn't get the same remarks. And, I had a teacher, I remember in 6th grade, because I was in 6th grade, I think, Miss Narkowski, and she was just incredible. And my parents, we were in that move to Garland and we were in Dallas. And I remember her just saying, she just sat me down and I remember crying and telling her, kids are so mean. And she said, you had nothing to do with this. This is not your fault. And you just be proud of who you are because you're a great person. And I think I just went with that and just, had to remind myself daily, I didn't do this. So I shouldn't feel ashamed and I shouldn't feel bad because I had nothing to do with it. People feel guilty after they've done something, they've wronged someone, but I was feeling guilty because of a group of people that I didn't even know. But kids are just mean.
Yeah. Well,
they're awful. Even now, I mean, I think the bullying is changed. Now it's social media and everywhere else. But yeah, it was tough.
So what high school did you go to?
I went to Rowlett High School. So I was living in Garland with my parents and went to Rowlett, and I went to Coyle Middle School, which is actually where my now adopted mom, she was principal. And so I didn't really know her during middle school because I was afraid of going to the principal's office because I wanted to be a lawyer and I couldn't get in trouble. So, I played my whole life where I have to be squeaky clean and, I can't get in trouble because they won't let me be a lawyer. But, I didn't know her at the time, so it's crazy how things kind of turned out. But then from Coyle, I went to Rowlett High School. Most of the Coyle kids that's where everybody went. So I went to Rowlett and loved it. I had a good experience and finally got to kind of be myself and be a little more open and met some of my best friends. Two of my bridesmaids, one of them I met in 7th grade shop class because, I was a very tomboy. And then the other one I met in high school. So, or 3 of them actually. So it was a good place for me. It was still bullying, but, it was better. I could handle my own and I could just say, talk to the hand.
Yeah. What about college?
So I went to UNT in Denton for college, and I knew I wanted to. We had orientation probably the first week, and I didn't know that as a freshman you had to live on the dorms on campus, and my parents didn't know. But I had moved out to Denton in that August, but I didn't actually start school until January. So I had that semester off, and I had graduated high school early in February, but I just kind of needed some time. And I didn't know when to enroll for college, so I was late to enroll. So really it was like a mandatory semester off because I was too late. But I went to UNT and started there and got out of the whole, freshman dorm rule. I don't even remember how. I just told the lady I just didn't know. Right. And they let me kind of get by. But yeah, I went to UNT in Denton and loved it. And I looked up what degrees lawyers have, and a lot of them are political science. So I just, filled in that box that I wanted to do that. And I've always been I've been a planner my whole life. And so I had this goal in mind, and I knew I had these boxes to check. And so I just kind of did throughout my whole life. But yeah, I loved my time at UNT, and that was really the first time that I was out on my own. My dad was he was really protective and sheltered us. And so when I got out to college, as most sheltered kids do, you just kind of go crazy. And I could, I would tell my friends, crazy for me isn't as crazy what people think, but I would go to Walmart at like 10 p.m. and I was so excited because I couldn't do that before. Yeah. We had the rule I had to be back home when the street lights came on, and I couldn't go to a movie if it started after 7. And so when I got to college, I would go to movies at 9, and I was rebelling.
Oh, man, you're definitely a rebel there.
I know, I was crazy. Yeah, no, it was fun times.
Well, in the Muslim family, was it male dominant?
It was, and I think that's also part of the Bosnian culture and just that general area. I think in the Middle Eastern area, but it was very much my mom was and she worked at a daycare. She worked at a nursing home at first, and then she worked at a daycare, and my dad was definitely in charge and kind of made the rules in the head, and she didn't really get a lot of say. But that was just how she was raised and how her mom did it and how her mom before did, and so it wasn't concerning or it wasn't different for her. It was just the way that you do life, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I'm very outspoken and opinionated, so my dad and I clashed a lot as a kid because I didn't just take something because he said it was true. I had to figure it out for myself.
There was, I remember I represented a kid that got hurt on a school bus and ended up getting him some money, and he was Muslim. Mm-hmm. And then his dad invited me over for dinner,
Mm-hmm.
and so I went over to dinner, but only he and I ate. You know, the wife served us, and the wife and the kids didn't eat with us. And then we went to the living room, and then they ate. It was a whole different experience.
Yeah, that's very different. I mean, my family never did that.
It wasn't
but
anything like that with y'all, huh?
No, I mean, we, the girls were expected to clean up the dishes and to get the food ready and to get it on the table. And even now in Bosnian culture, I mean, I have a lot of cousins that, the few times I've gone back, the very last time I was there, it was the most craziest thing happened. But my cousin got married. But for me, I thought she was getting kidnapped. And so, because that's how I learned. And I think some Asian cultures do it the same. But her boyfriend, told her, hey, I'm coming to pick you up at, 3 a.m. I'm going to come, with my friends. And, they all 5 or 6 cars pull up to the house. And she told me that was happening. And so I was looking out the window because, like, she's going to get kidnapped. And I know, I feel like I have to do something. I mean, now I would have to if I knew a crime was going to happen. But it, it wasn't a crime there. And so she got in the car with him, and, her parents and brothers and sisters didn't want her to because she was the one that was taking care of the house, and she was cleaning and she was doing the cooking. And so when the oldest daughter leaves, then, the next oldest has to step up to the plate and do the cooking and cleaning and helping with her mom. And so when she left, all of the men in the family kind of were like, oh, because one of the girls left, and now they had to, the next one had to come up. But she got in the car, and he drove off, and I think her brother got up and was yelling at the cars and trying to get his dad up, and but she was gone. I mean, they got in the car, and so we didn't hear from her for a few days because that was, I guess, the way that you do things. But then, she texted me, and she called her parents and said, I'm married and I'm at my husband's house now. And so then the girl goes to live with
How
his
old
parents.
Was she?
Oh, she was 17, I think, which is, I mean, now it's the age, but, when my parents were younger, people got married at 14 or 15. And even people here during the Great Depression time were married very young. And so it wasn't, it wasn't a big deal. But, she got in that car, and I remember thinking, what? Like, you're just leaving?
Yeah.
Yeah, he just picks you up in midnight. Like, you don't have to wear a dress. I mean, you don't have a wedding.
Did her
Like,
parents know it was going to happen?
I think they had suspicions because they had been talking about.
It sounds like they're eloping.
Yeah, they had suspicions, but it was just, I think now they have more of a ceremony, but no, she just got in that car and they left. And then, I got to meet up with her probably a week later, but, she didn't come back to the house because if she did and her brothers and dad made her stay, she'd have to stay. And so I just thought it was the darnest thing. And the fact that she then had to go and serve his parents. And, and cook and clean for his parents and for him and his siblings until they had money, and then they made their own house. And then, then she was cooking and serving for her husband and kids. And, Nick and I are going to get married, and there's a lot of things that I'm going to do like that, but it's by choice. But I'm not going to go and live with, his mom or his dad and serve them. I mean, they've got hands and feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was always, as a
It's
kid.
just a different culture.
Yeah, as a kid, I just remember telling, and I would say that to my dad, and he'd get so angry, and I'd get spanked. But, he'd say, hey, give me that remote. And I'd say, well, you've got 2 hands. They're just as able as mine.
Yeah.
So I've always been a firecracker.
Yeah.
Good luck to my fiance.
Yeah. Good luck. What's his name again?
Nick.
Nick's in trouble, I think.
I think
I bet he knows.
Yeah, he knows. I mean, and I'll do things, but if you think I'm going to do it just because I'm a girl, then we're at a different place. Then I stand my ground, and we're going to have an argument in court before I do that.
Well, were your parents in favor of you going to college and being a lawyer?
My parents were in favor of me going to college. I wanted to go to UT, and I was in the top 10% of my class in high school. And so, and I don't know if they still do it this way, but I basically had acceptance into UT, not the specific college, but to UT in general. And so I wanted to go there. And my dad kind of scared me out of going there because he said, what if you go and you have car troubles and you have all this, and, how are you going to afford to live out there? And so I just, I was like, well, he's right. I can't, because, I can't make it on my own. So I went to Denton, where, I was an hour away from home, and I could come back home and do laundry and get groceries from my mom. And, and so they wanted me to go to college. Definitely. They both were very much, high school is not going to get you many places. You have to get a college degree. And so I did. My dad didn't necessarily want me to be an attorney, I think, and he probably regrets it now, but he just didn't. His view growing up, being raised, was the woman was at home taking care of the kids, basically birthing and baking. And although I love baking, I was not ready to be birthing and baking for a man my whole life. So he thought, oh, you can go and and be a teacher, or you can be a homemaker. And I have many friends that are teachers and stay-at-home moms, and they love it. But I knew that I just I wanted to do something different. And I think, being a parent is probably one of the most things I'm excited about. But the fact that he didn't think I could do it, he didn't think I could be an attorney. I mean, I had to just turn around and say, watch, And so I think a lot of my dad and our relationship was rebelling, and he would say I couldn't, and I'd say, okay, give me 3 years, or so. Yeah, I think he wanted me to stay at home and take care of a husband and kids that I didn't have.
Did he help with the college? Did he help?
He did. My first semester, because I didn't enroll on time, I didn't know the financial aid process, and so I didn't apply for financial aid on time. And so my parents, that first semester that I had, they paid for my books and my tuition, and I think it was a few $1,000s. So I was very grateful that they stepped in. And I mean, they both wanted me to go to college. I think my dad had different dreams of what I could accomplish, what he thought a refugee immigrant, Muslim could accomplish. He didn't think I could accomplish greater than certain. Attorney was definitely, out of the question. It was expensive. It was a lot of work, and can you do that work? And I thought, well, I've had, straight A's in high school, so I think I can. I think it's just a little bit harder work, but I think I could probably do it if I just apply myself a little bit harder. So they did. They helped my first semester, and got me to. Then I applied for financial aid, and I got financial aid. So that was good, but they helped me get started. So
after
I'm
that,
grateful.
Did they help you anymore?
I think, with, gas and food and that kind of stuff they did. I had, I got school loans for college and tuition and books. And so my parents helped where they could, and, where I asked. And I didn't ask for a lot of help because I wanted to do it on my own. And so when I didn't have money, I went and sold my clothes to Plato's Closet. I did whatever I could do to make sure I did it on my own. But there was definitely a few times where I just knew I couldn't sell enough clothes, or, I had to
be any food tonight.
Yeah, I had to call in the troops. So yeah, they did. I mean, they helped, when I needed a supplemental book, or, I needed, my mom would take me to get clothes or groceries. She'd come to Denton and, buy me groceries. And so they, and he did a lot of my car repairs, because, he'd been a mechanic before. So he helped a lot in those ways, as much as they could. Yeah.
Did you work in college?
I did. I worked at a lot of different. I started and I worked at DSW. When I was in high school, I worked at Cece's Pizza in Rowlett, and I loved it because I was, at the front of the register, and I was loud, and so people would come in, and we had to say "Welcome to Cece's," and I was always the only one because I don't get embarrassed, and so I just, but I did. I worked in DSW, and then I worked at Victoria's Secret, and I think I worked at DSW probably for the most of the time. And then I started babysitting different families, and I got on, Sitter City, the website. And so I put a profile up, and, I'd babysat a few times here and there. And so people started, so I started babysitting for a family close to the end of my sophomore year, and babysat for a year. And, I was there from 8 to 5 on the days I didn't have school. Her husband worked and she worked from home, so she needed somebody to keep the kids quiet while she was in her office. So I did a lot of babysitting, and then, I started babysitting for a family that I did that for 8 years after that. So they're my little babies, because Jonathan was 8 months old and he's 9 years old now.
Oh, wow.
And Chloe was 2 and she's 11 now. So I'm there.
You told me that you were a nanny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that the same thing?
Yeah. Because I think, and I remember talking to Katie about it when I first started. So, one of the, when the kids were little, I went on vacation with them. So they were gone for, 2 weeks. And so I took care of mostly Jonathan, because he was a baby. He was a year old. So I, traveled with them. But it wasn't an occasional, babysitting, because when I first started, I just said I was a babysitter, but I would go, on occasional date night, and I'd never see that family again, or I'd see them, maybe twice a year. And then with Katie and Ian, I was just there, when I wasn't in school or classes. I was there weekdays and weeknights, and they love U2 and Coldplay, and so they've gone to Chicago every single time U2's been there. And it's been 3 days before, and it's been 5 days before, and so I stay with the kids, and I'm kind of mom and dad while they're gone. So I loved it. It was a lot. So
that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you're approaching age 21.
I know. We're going through chronologically.
Yeah. And you said this is when you begin to question your faith.
Yeah.
And tell me what brought about your conversion to Christianity and how that all came about.
I think a lot of, because my whole life I had been trained to excel in every class I did, and every extracurricular I did. I think my dad had this belief that, I had to get straight A's because I was an immigrant, and because, we had come from Bosnia. We got our citizenship my freshman year of high school, and I remember making these shirts with my sister that said, proud to be an American. And, we just did like gel pens on these shirts. And so my dad, my whole life, had, always instilled in us that we had to do more than, somebody that was born here to get recognized and to do well. And so in college, that's all I had done, was just work and school and study. And so I just felt like I needed something else. And I, although I had friends and family, I just felt this kind of emptiness, that I needed something different, and something that was bigger than myself. And so, 2 weeks before my 21st birthday, I just started questioning, why do I feel so alone when I'm with friends? And why do I feel like I study and I get good grades, but it's not enough? It's not a reward enough. And I was in a gender communications class. We were talking about a gender fair, and my teacher was, she was great. And, she started, we talked about spirituality in there, and I just kind of thought, maybe that's what it is I don't believe in anything. I believe that, if I study really hard all night and I take the test and I make an A, that I'm a good student and I'm a good person. But there's nothing, it was just always about grades. And so I just started questioning. And so, that Thursday before my 21st birthday was on a Monday. I remember laying in my bed and just praying, and because I didn't know what was true, I prayed to Allah, I prayed to Buddha, I prayed to Jesus. I mean, I just covered my bases like an attorney would. I just, I just said, whoever's out there. And so, I remember waking up the next day and just thinking, I should go to church this Sunday. And, that's, I prayed for 2 hours, and I feel like that's where I need to go. And that's my answered prayer. And so I did. I went to, church on March 6th of 2011. And, I talked to, my now adopted mom, Dretha, and I'd sent her a message on Facebook and just asked her if I could come to church, and, if there's a uniform or if you have to be a member. And, she said, no, just come as you are. Here are our service times. And so I walked in, and, I'd always, learned that if a Muslim walked into a church, that it was just the worst thing you could do. And so I was terrified, and I was by myself, and I sat in the parking lot looking at the church doors, thinking, if I walk in there, they're all going to know there's going to be a big A or a big M, Muslim walking in the building. But, I walked in and everybody was just great and wonderful. And so I went to First Rowlett Methodist Church and walked in, and I sat in there, and then for the next...
How did you pick that church?
Well, that was where Doretha, that was where she was an associate pastor. So she had left Coyle Middle School, retired from teaching, and went into ministry. And so when I'd sent her a message on Facebook, because Andrew and I were really good friends. My senior year of high school, we were best friends. We were inseparable.
And who's Andrea?
My now sister. I know, small world. And so I knew that Doretha was, I knew her mom, Doretha, was a pastor. And so I just sent her that message on Facebook. And she told me, hey, I'm at this church. And if you want to come, I'll meet you at the front door. And so she did. I walked in, and she was waiting for me right there. And we went in there, and it was really great. And for the 2 months after that, I went to all 3 services. I don't know why it was the same service, same message each time, but I just felt like I just needed to get everything that I could get in it. I don't do that now because it's just too much.
Yeah.
So have you been to any other churches besides that one?
Well, I've worked at several different Methodist churches. So I got baptized in that church in March. Or in May. So I started in March on my birthday, and then got baptized in May. And then I started working at Faith Methodist in Corinth while I was in school. I worked there, and I babysat as a ministry intern. And then I worked in Prosper Methodist Church, and I was their children's director. And then I worked in First Rowlett while I was waiting for bar results. In my last semester of law school. So I've been to different churches. Now Nick and I attend the Avenue here on 77. Mm-hmm. So once we get married, I'll move down here, and then we'll be going to the Avenue. He's not even a member there, but he's gone on several mission trips, and they're all like, "Oh, you're a member." Like you may not have checked that box, but he's been there for a while, so I like it.
Yeah, I like the Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Been there a couple of times.
Was it ever a tough decision to?
That was definitely my parents found out in July of that year, July of 2011, that I'd been going to church, and growing up in my household, my dad viewed the word Jesus as a cuss word almost. And so my sister and I and Ella were both rebellious. I think I a little bit more. And so we'd, do something in the house, or he'd say something, and I'd say, "Oh, Jesus, Dad." And for him, it was like me cursing. I would say it sarcastically, and it was, never in vain, or I didn't know. But, it was like the F word. And so the little rebel that I was, I knew that he wasn't going to accept that I'd been going to church. And because I was, I never wanted to lie, I would tell my parents that I was going to have lunch with a friend on Sunday. And then I would come home after. And so I would go to church the first 3 services, and then I would find somebody to go to lunch with, so that I wasn't lying technically, even though I left out what I was doing that morning. And then I'd come home, and they'd say, "How was lunch? It was so long, 4 hours." And like, "Oh, it was great. Just a lot of catching up." So, which, I still think is lying, because I did tell them the whole story, but I felt a little bit better. But yeah, they found out in July from, I think, Facebook, that I'd posted something that just said God. I knew not to post Jesus, but I hadn't ever talked about God before. And so, my dad sat me down and said, "Hey, I heard you've been talking about God a lot, and what's going on?" And so I just sat there thinking, well, what am I going to, here we go. What am I going to do? And, at this point I had already been baptized too. And so I made that decision.
And so you're 21?
Yes, I'm 21. And I remember sitting there, and, my mom was sitting there, and my sister-in-law was with me, and Enos, and we, Nella and I both had our legs kind of up, crouched, and we were texting, and so I remember her texting me saying, "Don't tell him." And she knew, because she had gone with me to my baptism. I asked her, and, I knew it would be uncomfortable for her, and I told her, "You don't have to come, but if you want to, I'm doing this." And, if you want to be there, you can. If you don't, I completely understand, and I'm not going to, I don't hold it against you, because I knew that she could get in trouble too. And so it was her decision. So she sat with me, and so she knew, and she just texted me and said, please don't tell him. Like, don't tell him right now. And, and I just remember sitting there and thinking, and remember reading that passage in the Bible that, says, if you deny me. And so I just remember thinking, I can't deny Jesus. I've been going to 3 services, and I've been, living this life, and I feel like I'm not empty anymore. And I didn't have that same feeling of being empty and sad and depressed. And it's because now I've been going to church, and I know who Jesus is, and, his plan for my life. And so I can't deny him. I can't, and I could have. I mean, I think a lot of people, told me, well, you could have just said that, and then still gone to church and been a Christian. And I definitely considered that in that moment, because it would have been the easier route. But I knew that I couldn't say those words if they weren't true. And so I couldn't tell him that I wasn't a Christian and that I didn't believe, because I would just rot inside. And so I told him, yes, I have, I've been going to church, and, and I thought he would, I thought it would be good. I had lined up, all of this evidence to show him that it wasn't a bad thing, because I was still in school. I was still getting really good grades. I wasn't getting in trouble. I wasn't on drugs. I wasn't doing any of these things that, nothing had changed. I had just become happier and more happy with my life and my plan for my life. And so I just thought, any parent is going to see that and think, well, that's great. You haven't gone down the wrong path. You're happy who you are. I'm proud of you, or I'm happy for you. But my dad got shot at, and his brother got killed because of people, that were Christian. And so he has this deep-rooted, hatred, I think, because of that. And I didn't really understand that until years later. And although it wasn't all Christians, just like the Muslim thing, it was particular Christians during that war that did these horrific things that, my dad associated with the religion. And so, it was tough. And so I just told him, I have more faith in Jesus than I have in my family. And this is just my path. So he didn't agree with that. And, he would text me and just say, what a shame, and just all kinds of nasty things. And I know he was angry, but, at the end of the day, when I'm angry, I try not to say things, because I know that it's not really how I feel. But I think there was just so much anger in him from, having lived through that war and associating with that he took it very, my whole family did. And, my aunts and uncles and everyone I was a disgrace, and, I was the black sheep of the family. And, the little stubbornness in me just thought, well, if the black sheep in the family is the one that's getting straight A's in college and going to law school, then so be it. There's a lot of worse things that I could be. But it was a few months that, he didn't, I just didn't talk to my parents or my sisters, because, he took their phones. He turned off my phone because he was paying for it. And so I didn't really have a way of communicating with them. And my church stepped in and they helped.
Did he ever give you an ultimatum, or ever say you can't do this, or if you do this,
Well, I think that whole conversation that we had that night was an ultimatum, and I knew that he was the one that he had my mom and my sisters. They were in his house, and he paid for everything, and so I knew that it was, and he told me you can't be in this family and be a Christian, so you have to choose. And so for me sitting there, it was you pick your family or you pick Jesus, but you can't have both, because he's made it clear that you can't have both. And even though you've tried to show him that you can, because you have for the last 5 months, and he didn't know, that was really my argument. And I had already prepared it months before, that look, nothing has changed. You didn't even know I was a Christian, and I'm the same daughter. But for him it was Jesus or my family. It was a deal breaker, and that was the ultimatum. So I told him I had more faith in Jesus, and I haven't really talked to my dad since 2011 because he's still holding on to it. So
2011. So this was. So you're
7
27 now.
years. 7 years. I'm 28.
You're 28. Yeah, so this was when you. So you haven't talked to him since you were 21.
Mm-hmm. No, he's he doesn't text me my birthday or call. He's probably texted me maybe 3 times in that 7 years. I mean, in the beginning it was a lot, but it was just I can't believe you did this, and you're a disgrace, and your grandparents are turning over in their graves and that kind of stuff, and I'm coming to take your car, and just a lot of language like that. And so the first month or so, I was just really scared because I didn't really know what he would do, and I knew he controlled everything back home. I held steadfast, I think, to my faith, and my church in Rowlett really stepped up, and they started a benevolence fund, and people donated, and so people paid for my books, and then my car repairs. Because he did all my car repairs, and so they paid for car repairs, and there was a family that said, "Hey, we'll buy all 4 tires, for her car," and so I just went to Discount Tire, and I told them who sent me, and so they put it on their card, and so people stepped in great ways. There was a dentist that he heard my story, and I needed 4 root canals, and he said, "Hey, I'll do those 4 root canals for that girl, and I won't charge her a thing." And then we found an organization that helps people get back into jobs. I think it's called the Dallas Area Rehabilitation Center, and so if you apply, and you're a candidate, they will help you get back to work. And so they paid for my 2 ear surgeries. So I had my ears fixed. And so, even though my family had stepped out, my church and the rest of the world really stepped in. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever question that you made the right decision?
I think in the beginning, I thought about it a lot. I didn't question it necessarily because I knew that if I could go back, that's the same thing I would do. And even now, knowing what I had lost and what I have lost still, I didn't question the decision. I think a lot of times I questioned maybe the way that I spoke to him that night, or, posting it on Facebook. I should have waited longer or something. I questioned a lot of that because I wanted it to work out differently. And I invited him to my wedding. He's my birth mom has already told me he's not going to come. And I don't know if my family will come, but I've told them all they're invited, and I've prepared for them to be there. If they come, they have a table. But I just wish that hadn't happened. I wish that hadn't worked out the way it did. So I did question that. I didn't question picking Jesus because, I mean, Nick and I are in premarital counseling now, and we both agree that, Jesus comes first. Mm-hmm. And then, when we get married, then you. But for my family, I don't think they could understand that. It was such a big, deep hole for me when I was 20 that I just felt such a sincere, I'm missing this big part that I could never go back. And when I made that decision, it was a lifelong decision. And I knew it was going to be really hard because I wrote on a legal pad all the pros and cons. I did my research, but it just wasn't worth, what I would have missed out on had I not made the decision.
You said your stepsister's Andrea?
Yes, adopted sister.
Adopted sister.
Mm-hmm.
Was she at UNT at the time?
No, she was at Texas Tech in Lubbock. So she and I were, we were best friends in high school with, in my senior year and her junior year with our friend Jordan. And then she went to Texas Tech and I was at UNT and Jordan was at Ole Miss. And so we were all separated, in different places, but she was at Texas Tech and then she came back to Rowlett.
Why did you decide to reach out to them instead of, say, something around the UNT campus or something around there?
It was just familiar, and I knew that Dritha, because, Andrew and I had still stayed in contact, I knew that Dritha was a pastor, and I remember asking Andrew, I did a speech in school, and I needed to use a part of Matthew, and I didn't know, the first number was a chapter and then the verse. So I said, hey, in my speech, what am I supposed to say? Matthew 5:14 or something. And so, so she told me that, and I said, hey, I have some questions about religion too. And so she said, hey, my mom's a great resource. And so I just reached out to her because I had known her and I knew she was my middle school principal, in 6th and 7th grade. So, or 7th and 8th grade. So it was just familiar. I knew that she was a really sweet person, even though I didn't want to know her in middle school.
Did you ever?
Well, now you do.
Yeah.
Did you ever get into any of the, say, the Christian groups or Christian churches there at UNT?
Yeah, I was a part of Focus, which is Fellowship of Christian University Students. And I did that when I first became a Christian. I was, dating this guy, and he was in that group. And so I, started with them. And I really liked it because it wasn't a group that pushed religion on anybody. It was really more of a conversation. We just talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
What do you believe and why you believe it? And there's people that came that weren't Christians, and we gathered together and we sang together, and it was really a lot about spirituality. But we knew that we were there for each other, and I was a part of a girls' Bible study that was a part of that group, and I had other girls to lean on, and I think it was hard because my prayer requests or my questions were, well, my family hasn't talked to me in 2 years, and they're like, well, I don't know how to, I don't know what to do.
Nobody could relate to that.
Yes.
Been there.
So that, that was hard, but, I love that group because, we would have Thanksgivings together, and my first Thanksgiving and Christmas, my dad asked me to make that decision in July. And so when Thanksgiving rolled around, everybody knew. And so, there was several people in that group that, said, hey, you can come with my family for Thanksgiving. We'd love to have you, or, you can come with my family for Christmas. And so there was people then that were fighting over, who I would go with for Thanksgiving or Christmas. But it was, that first year was difficult. And I think that group, I don't remember how I found them. I think 'cause I was dating that guy, but it was a good group. A lot of people that were really supportive.
Did your grades at school suffer during this time?
No, that's, that's what's crazy. As I think going through probably one of the worst emotional turmoils in my life, and really mental draining. And I still knew I still want to be a lawyer. So I have to maintain my grades, and I have to, I just had to stay the course, even though it was really hard. So, I'd be crying at night for 5 hours, and I'd go to sleep, and I'd wake up, go to school, and I had done all my reading and, done all my homework, because I was so afraid of getting in trouble my whole life that even when I was going through that, I couldn't get in trouble. So, no, my grades were still good. I had...
What was your GPA at graduation?
I think I had 3.56. High enough for me.
Has there been anyone else in your family that's converted to Christianity?
No, not in not confirmed, I guess. Not that I know for sure. I do have a cousin that's, posted some things on Instagram and quoted Bible scripture and verses. I think her dad was, one of the ones that, was like, if it was my daughter, I'd knock some sense into her, but, whatever. I don't know exactly. But, his daughter now is talking about it. There was a girl that was a relative, but I don't know how we were related, a distant cousin of some sort, and she converted. And I remember her sending me a message on Facebook and just saying, hey, I'm a Christian, and, this is how I found my path. And it was completely different. But, she messaged me and said, you've really gave me a lot of courage, because I didn't know what would happen. And I didn't, she said, it's something that I'd thought about, but I couldn't make the decision. And I see that you have, and I saw how people reacted, because, in the Bosnian community, everyone knew. I mean, we were a small community. And so, Sherry, the black sheep, has left the culture. And, I think a lot of people thought it was kind of me giving my finger to the culture and to the heritage, which it wasn't, and still isn't. But, she just sent me that really sweet message and just said, you gave me the courage and the extra push to tell people of the decision that I made. And so I thought, you know what? If even one person crosses that bridge and makes that decision on their own, because of all of the stuff that I had to go through, it was worth it for me. And I didn't do it for that. I didn't do it for somebody else, but it was nice of her to say that.
Did you have anybody before you that had done something similar that you used kind of like an idol? Not
that I can think of, not a specific, converting from Muslim to Christian or any type of conversion. I was really kind of in the Bosnian community, the trailblazer for that, because people hadn't done that. And it was, we'd all gone to school with Christians our whole life. I mean, I was living in Texas. I'd been here since I was 6. And so, and my dad always wanted us to marry a Bosnian man. And I remember thinking, well, where am I going to find one?
Yeah.
I'm in Texas. I'm in Garland, Texas.
Yeah.
Now there were some, but not that I wanted to spend my life with. And so, even getting married now to an American man, to a Texan, is absurd, but he's good to me. And he's the type of man that I want and that I deserve. And I just, I never did find that in a Bosnian man. I wasn't against it, but no one else had really done anything like this. So I think now everyone sees that, nothing happened to me. And so they're like,
didn't strike or anything like that.
So, they're like, hey, maybe, I can do this or do that. And, there's been other Bosnians that have had, babies out of wedlock, or, that were like, whoa, and, so I think people have just seen that it's okay to go your own way, that it's not saying anything against your heritage or your culture or religion. It's just saying I want something different. Yeah. But
taking a different route.
Well, now that it's been 7 years, how's your relationship with your Bosnian family?
My sister's, Anela specifically, she was, I think she was, 15 or 16 maybe at the time. So she and I had already bonded enough that, she knew I loved her and she knew that I cared for her. The younger one really didn't. And I think in the first year or two, my dad just told her that I left, that I didn't want to be a part of the family. And so she didn't understand. And she really turned that kind of against me, because I couldn't communicate with her because she was 7. And so she grew up for the first, I don't know how long, thinking that I just left her because I didn't care and I didn't love her. And I think that that was, if anything was going to break me, it was probably that, because of course that's not how it went down and how it happened. But, all she knew as a 6-year-old was that my biggest sister left because she doesn't care and she doesn't want to be in my family anymore. So she and our relationship isn't, I think, as strong of a bond as Anela and I have. But, my birth mom, we talk here and there in text, and I've gone to lunch with her. And I think it's hard for her to understand that I can't just pick up where we left off. And I think that's what she wants, from the conversations we've had or the text messages, she sent. That's just kind of what she expects, that, I'll just clue her in on my life and let's go from here. But, there's just so much that we would have to talk about. And, and I've expressed that. And I think, she's just kind of at the point like, well, let's just leave that behind and move forward. And I'm all for that. That's why I'm open to reconciliation. But I can't just pretend like it didn't happen. We have to talk about it.
Yeah.
So, and then with my dad, we don't talk at all. I don't know if he's coming to my wedding. He's not walking me down the aisle. And so I think he's upset about that. But
would an Islamic Muslim wedding be completely different than the Christian wedding? Do you know?
I think, a lot of our ceremony aspects are, they're all Christian. Nick and I are both Christian. I've been to a few Bosnian weddings because my dad used to sing. He had a keyboard and he would sing at weddings and play music. But even those, they still, did the white dress and walked to the altar. They just didn't, pray at the beginning or the end, or they didn't sing Christian songs.
So the father still walked the bride down and gives her away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's still very similar. And now in Bosnia, people are doing more of that too. Like I've seen cousins that have gotten married and, they're wearing white dresses and, which didn't used to be before. When my parents got married, my mom just packed a suitcase and walked to my dad's parents' house and, stayed with them and served them. And my cousin, like I was telling you, it was a very informal kind of eloping thing.
So did you talk about your adopted mom? Is there an adopted dad?
No, she never got married. So she was engaged before and never got married. So she knew she wanted to be a mom and wanted to be a parent, and so she adopted Andrea when Andrea was 6.
As a single mom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then she adopted Andrea and raised her as a single mom, a teacher, counselor, principal. She's played every role, I think. And then after my dad had me make that ultimatum, she kind of stepped in and took care of anything I needed. She's the one that talked to the church and started the benevolence fund. And so she was my go-to because, she's the one that I went to. And then after I did in this decision, I didn't know who else I could turn to. I had some friends, my 2 mentors, I turned to them too. But she, I asked her, and I think she and Andrea had talked about it before, adoption. And then I asked her, I asked Andrea, what she thought about it and if they adopted me. And, I remember telling my mom, I just want an emergency contact. I just want to have somebody to put down. It's something as simple as an emergency contact.
You didn't have one?
No, I didn't. I didn't know which one of my cousins or uncles would answer because, I hadn't heard from any of them, and they'd, shunned me and said it was this horrible thing I did. And so I didn't really, I didn't have anyone that, that I thought would answer. And so, that was one of the reasons. And so we did a formal adult adoption when I was 24 years old in Dallas County.
So you've been adopted awesome. for 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we celebrate Family Day, which is, the day that she adopted Andrea in October and then me in July. And, we just celebrate becoming a family. And, I made the choice to ask her to adopt me, and she made the choice to respond, and Andrea made the choice. So
who's walking you down the aisle?
Nice. My Uncle TJ. My mom's brother. So he lives in Whitney now, where my grandparents
So this is your adopted mom's brother.
Yeah.
Your adopted uncle.
Yep.
Adopted
so
uncle.
he's walking me down the Burris family.
All right.
That's good.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Well, it's 3:25. I guess we ought to close it. I still got a ton of questions, but I guess I know you got
we have probably enough for 1 or 2 more.
Yeah. Well,
it took me I think 2 minutes to get here, and only because it took me 1 minute to turn on my car and stop at the stop sign. But I could have walked. I think it was a 7-minute walk when I looked it up.
Well, I know that you went to UNT Law School, and when you went there, it wasn't an accredited law school.
No, it wasn't. That was a gamble. I'd gotten to Texas Tech law.
It seems like a lot of things you do are gambles.
I know they are, but I've always just followed my gut and my instinct. And if I think that this is, even now when I look and screen cases, is this the right thing to do at this time for this person? Is this the right case? And so, picking that school, it was really, I remember my mom Doretha talking to me about it. And she said, hey, there's a new law school. And I didn't even, when I was at UNT, they mentioned a law school, but it was like years in the making. And I knew that it had to go through the legislature. And so I thought that's never going to get done. We were so divided. But it did. And so I went and asked for a tour. And when I went and had my tour, it was really an interview. I didn't know. And I met with one of the dean of admissions. And so we didn't get accreditation until my 3rd year.
So you went to 2 years of law school not knowing if you were even going to get to sit for the bar.
Yes. Well, and they told us, here are the options. If we don't get the accreditation, we can petition the Supreme Court in Texas, and, they could allow us. And they had done that before, and I think they'd done that for Texas Wesleyan before they were accredited. And so we had a plan, but that first year, I mean,
there were
really,
no guarantees.
right. I mean, it was still a gamble either way because the Supreme Court could say no.
Mhm.
We didn't think that they would, but they could, and so really it was you're getting an illegal education, you're paying for it, and you don't know if you'll be able to take that 3-day test that's going to determine the rest of it.
Did you put yourself through law school?
I did. I took loans and I got some scholarships, and in undergrad I got scholarships because I had good grades, so I didn't have a lot of debt. But the first year, my mom really helped a lot because I had a little bit of savings from the job that I'd worked. I took a year off between college and law school and saved, but she helped tremendously in the first year and helped me with making sure I had gas money and all that stuff. And then my second and third year, I took school loans because I didn't, on a pastor's salary, I didn't want it to be too much on her.
Yeah.
So I told her, now that we have funding, because we didn't have funding the first year because we weren't accredited. And so, it's like everywhere I go, I'm the underdog until I succeed.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
So.
Well, I don't have any doubt that you're going to succeed in life.
Oh, thank you.
You make decisions, and you're a serious woman, even at work. I mean,
he tells people that all the time.
Yeah, she's a serious
She's
little.
serious.
Yeah, she's a
business.
Yeah, man. If you're talking to her, you're talking business. So
I think I've just always been very calculated in my decision making and in anything I've done. And I don't know, maybe it was because I wanted to be a lawyer. I knew I always had to have evidence to back up what I was saying or what statement I was making. I had to have something to support why I thought a certain way. And so all of those decisions have always, been that way. I mean, picking UNT, it was going to be significantly less expensive for me to go there than to go somewhere else. And, my backup plan was if I didn't get accredited, I would go to law school at Tech. I would start all over. I would do another 3 years. But I was young. I mean, I didn't have a family or husband or kids, and so I could do that. A lot of people I think couldn't, but I've always had a backup before I move forward with the decision. So even at work, I've looked it all up before. I mean, we had an animal seizure together, and I remember coming.
We lost.
Yeah, we did. We did. But I remember coming to Vance's office and having all this, and he was like, "Well, you know everything about this case."
Yeah.
Like, well, that's just. I like to prepare. I like to know what I'm going into.
You did your research.
I just go in there and I'm always as surprised as what comes out of our mouth as everybody else is, So, but yeah, no, well, I'm excited for you, man. It's awesome. You got past the bar, getting married, prosecuting. That's what you want to do. Now, you're going to be a superstar in the prosecutor world.
Yeah.
So you're going to get to prosecute child abuse cases like you wanted.
Yes.
So I'm sure we're not going to be able to keep you long here in Ellis County.
Well, I mean, this is where I have a house now, so I hope so. Yeah, this
should be good.
Yeah, this was this was, one of those things that just happened. I mean, it was like the dream job. I thought I would have to work in, way smaller places and just kind of get going before I could start. And then it just fell in my lap. And so this is, we're in Ellis. We have a house in Waxahachie, so this would be perfect for until I'm done prosecuting.
and I aggravate her because she's so serious about her spirituality. She still drives every day from Rowlett.
Instead of living here.
I
know. He always says your moral compass.
Yeah, that's right. Your morality and spirituality ought to be commended.
Yeah, it's about an hour, depending, if it's raining or if it's a certain time of day. It's an hour and 15, hour and a half, but it's about an hour. But I'm almost there. When I started, I remember telling my mom, "This is 6 months. That I have to drive, and
it's a long time.
It's a long time." And she's always. Anytime I've had a decision, she's always asked me, how do you eat an elephant? And I used to just think it was just the silliest thing. And, but now I always say 1 bite at a time.
1 bite at a time.
So
That's
1 day at a time.
Yeah.
4 months down.
That's going to be the name of the podcast. How do you eat an elephant?
1 bite at a time.
That's this episode.
Yeah.
I guess we ought to close. I appreciate you coming in today, and I hope I hope I didn't put you on the spot too bad. I hope you don't mind me getting into your childhood and your family and religious questions. I know these are a lot of personal questions for a lot of people, and so I appreciate you coming in and being so honest and forthright. And we're hoping, at least our 2 of our 3 listeners might enjoy it.
Hey, I'll tell Nick and my mom, hey, go listen. Yeah, we'll have 2 more of us. And then me.
All right. We got to go to the wedding shower.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
I wish you and Nick nothing but the best.
Thank you. Thank you, Vance.
All right. We got to get a picture before you leave.
All right. I'll do that.
All right. I'm going to cut you off.
Cut me off.
All right. I hope y'all enjoyed Sherry's interview. You can see from her, from her interview that she is a very sharp young lady. She's got her life planned out. She's going to be a superstar lawyer. She knows what she wants to do, and I have no doubts that she's going to do exactly what she sets her mind to. I hope you enjoyed Sherry's interview. Look around the people around you as always. Check, just talk to them and listen to them. Find out their stories. We can learn from everybody. Everybody around us has experiences. They have, life, things that happen in their life that's different than ours. That we can learn from, that we can that will help us, become a better person, help us to become a better husband, a better boss, a better employee, or just a better whatever you want to be. And so I encourage you to reach out to those people in your life that are extra usual. Talk to them. Try to learn from their experiences and educate yourself on different beliefs, different ideals, different ways, and never stop learning, never stop questioning. That's what life is about. So I know I'm kind of rambling now, but I want to thank Sherry for coming out and participating. I want to thank y'all for listening. I hope her and her biological families, reunite someday. I hate to see any family broken up over, their faith differences or their spiritual differences. But but Sherry's been through a lot. Their family's been through a lot. They've had a lot of battles over their faith and their spirituality. So. I hope they're able to reconcile someday. But I know that Sherry's a superstar in the making. I know she's going to do whatever she sets her mind to. And I thank you for listening to the podcast. Next week, I think we've got Dr. Natasha Janina. Dr. Natasha Janina Valdez Solomon. She is a sexologist and she's written a couple of books. It's an interesting interview. She's a sex therapist, a licensed sex therapist. She's had her own radio show. She's for years, syndicated 10, 12, 15 years. I can't remember off the top of my head, but she's been on Howard Stern. She's dated Mick Jagger. She's had an interesting life. And so it's a podcast you don't want to miss. So the next one is Dr. Natasha, and you don't want to miss that podcast. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.